In a quiet cornfield outside Baoding, the body was not the most disturbing discovery. The morning air over Golan village was thick with moisture. A light fog clung to the soil, lingering after a night of summer rain. Rows of corn stretched toward the horizon, their leaves tall and sharp, whispering softly as the wind passed through. This was farmland. Predictable. Ordinary. Nothing here was meant to surprise. An elderly farmer noticed the damage first. Several stalks had been crushed flat, bent in a way that did not match the pattern of weather or animals. He followed the disturbance along a narrow path between the rows, stepping carefully through the mud. After 10 meters, the ground opened into a small clearing. He stopped. Lying on her back was the body of a young woman. She was completely naked. Her skin, pale against the dark soil, was smeared with mud and streaked with abrasions. Her face was swollen beyond recognition, bruised so severely that the features no longer held their original shape. Her eyes were open, fixed on nothing, reflecting the dull gray of the morning sky. The farmer dropped his tool. He did not scream. He could not. Local police arrived within minutes. The cornfield was sealed off with yellow tape, the quiet broken by radios and hurried footsteps. Leading the response was Captain Li T, head of the Baoding Criminal Investigation Unit. Beside him stood forensic examiner Chen Ming, already pulling on latex gloves as he approached the body. Rain had not been kind to the scene. Footprints were blurred. Drag marks softened. But enough remained to tell a preliminary story. Time of death was estimated between midnight and 2 in the morning. Lividity patterns along the back and hips matched the position in which the body was found. Rigor mortis had begun to set in the jaw and facial muscles. When Chen examined the neck, his expression hardened. Deep bruising circled the throat. Fingertip-shaped contusions were visible beneath the skin. Mechanical asphyxiation. Manual strangulation. The woman had fought. Scratches lined her arms and thighs. Long, straight abrasions ran down her back, consistent with being dragged across rough ground after she lost consciousness or died. Yet the field itself was clean. No clothing. No shoes. No jewelry. No identification of any kind. Whoever brought her here had taken everything. As technicians combed the area, Li Tia noticed something unusual near the victim's head. Scattered on the damp soil were several yellow corn kernels. Fresh. Smooth. Not the type grown in this field, where corn was cultivated for animal feed, left to harden and dry on the stalk. He ordered them collected. The examination continued. When officers carefully rolled the body to inspect her back, the atmosphere changed. Movement stopped. For a brief moment, no one spoke. From between the victim's legs protruded a strip of green husk. Chen Ming halted the process immediately. Using forceps, he slowly extracted the object. It was a whole ear of corn, still wrapped in its outer leaves, approximately 18 centimeters long. It had been forced deep into the body with enough pressure to cause severe internal injury. The insertion had occurred after death. No one needed to say it aloud. This was not a sexual act. There was no evidence of gratification. No biological trace suggesting impulse. What remained was intention. Li Tia stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the evidence bag now holding the corn. In years of service, he had seen brutality. He had seen rage. He had never seen something arranged so deliberately, so symbolically. This was not about desire. This was not about opportunity. It was not an act of impulse. It was a message. Part 1. Forensics do not lie. The autopsy began that afternoon under fluorescent lights that stripped all warmth from the room. The body of the woman recovered from the cornfield lay on a stainless steel table, cleaned of mud but not of violence. Every mark remained. Every injury waited to be interpreted. Chen Ming began with the neck. The bruising was extensive and symmetrical, concentrated around the laryngeal area. When he exposed the deeper structures, the finding was conclusive. The hyoid bone was fractured cleanly. This required significant force, not a sudden outburst, not hesitation. The pressure had been applied steadily, deliberately, until breathing stopped. Manual strangulation. There were no defensive wounds on the hands of the victim, consistent with the use of a weapon. Instead, abrasions and bruises on her forearms indicated she had tried to pry the attacker's hands away. She had been conscious. She had struggled. Death likely occurred within 3 minutes. The examination moved downward. Along the victim's back and thighs, Chen documented long, linear abrasions. Their direction and pattern suggested she had been dragged across soil and broken stalks. This did not happen during the assault. The injuries lacked the inflammation expected if they were inflicted while the heart was still pumping. She had been moved after death. Inside the abdominal cavity, no significant internal disease was found. Toxicology would later confirm the absence of narcotics or alcohol at levels sufficient to impair consciousness. The woman had been sober, alert, fully aware. Attention returned to the object that had transformed the case from violent homicide into something more disturbing. The ear of corn. Chen examined the genital injuries with clinical detachment. Severe tearing of soft tissue was present, extending beyond what could be explained by forced penetration during life. The absence of hemorrhaging patterns associated with living trauma confirmed his conclusion. The corn had been inserted after the heart had stopped. There was no sexual assault in the conventional sense. No semen. No evidence of arousal. No attempt at physical gratification. This act served another purpose entirely: humiliation. The corn itself became evidence. Its husk was green and moist. Sap residue was still visible along the leaves. This was not feed corn left to dry in fields like the one where the body was found. It was a fresh variety harvested recently. The kernels were large, uniform, and unusually vibrant. Chen noted the difference immediately. Samples were taken from the corn, the victim's stomach contents, and trace debris found on her clothing-less body. Within hours, a connection emerged. Undigested corn fragments were present in the stomach. The victim had eaten corn approximately 2 hours before death. The same corn? This detail narrowed the timeline and reframed the interaction between victim and killer. The corn was not introduced randomly. It had been present before the murder. It was part of the encounter. Investigators began to understand the pattern forming beneath the brutality. The killer did not act in haste. He did not use what was conveniently available at the scene. He brought the object with him. He selected it. He prepared it. Back at the cornfield, Li Tae reviewed the scene photographs again. The lack of personal belongings was no longer just an attempt to delay identification. It was part of a broader erasure. The victim was stripped not only of her life, but of her identity and dignity. Every step pointed to control. The physical strength required to overpower an adult woman, strangle her manually, transport her body, and stage the scene suggested a male offender with significant upper body power. The even pressure marks around the neck indicated experience or rehearsal. This was not the first time hands had closed around a throat. Psychologically, the act defied simple categorization. This was not a crime of passion. Passion burns fast and leaves chaos. This scene was ordered, clean, intentional. The post-mortem insertion of the corn transformed the body into a message rather than an object of desire. Someone wanted the victim to be seen this way. As the forensic report was finalized, one conclusion became unavoidable. The killer was not motivated by opportunity or impulse. He was communicating something specific, something personal. And the corn was the language he had chosen. Li Ti closed the folder slowly. Whatever this meant, it was not finished. Someone wanted the victim to carry something into death. Part 2. Buried Histories. Identification came quickly once the body reached the city morgue. The victim was Shen Jia, 28 years old, an employee at a small hair salon in the old district of Baoding. She lived alone in a rented room less than 3 kilometers from where her body was discovered. According to her employer, she had failed to show up for work on the morning of October 5th. This was unusual. Shen Jia was rarely absent without notice. Her room was tidy. Almost too tidy. Expensive cosmetics lined the vanity. Designer clothing hung neatly in the wardrobe. These details did not align with the income of a salon worker. Someone had been supplementing her lifestyle. Investigators began cataloging her personal relationships, and the picture that emerged was complicated. Shen Jia was known to associate with several wealthy men. Some provided gifts. Others provided cash. None described the relationship as exclusive. One name surfaced repeatedly: Wang Da, a construction materials dealer with significant financial resources and a reputation for volatility. He was questioned the same day. Wang admitted to seeing Shen Jia on the afternoon of October 4th. He claimed he gave her money and then spent the night drinking with friends at a local restaurant. Witnesses confirmed his presence there, but a gap appeared in his alibi. He had left the restaurant for nearly an hour shortly after 1 in the morning. When confronted, Wang explained that he went to Shen Jia's apartment to demand repayment of a debt. According to him, she owed him 500,000 yuan and was planning to leave the city. He said the door was locked and no one answered. There was no physical evidence linking Wang to the murder. His fingernails were trimmed clean. His hands showed no injuries consistent with manual strangulation. More importantly, nothing in his history suggested the kind of symbolic violence seen in the cornfield. Attention shifted back to the corn. In the trash bin inside Shen Jia's room, investigators found a plastic bag containing partially eaten boiled corn. The cobs matched the corn recovered from the crime scene in size, color, and kernel structure. This was not coincidence. The source of the corn became the priority. Forensic analysis identified it as a hybrid variety, approximately 30% larger than standard feed corn. Its husk was thin, its kernels tightly packed and uniform. An agricultural specialist confirmed the identification. This was a genetically modified strain, code-named T12. It was not sold commercially. Only one location in Baoding cultivated it: the Northern Experimental Farm. As teams began reviewing access records from the facility, Li Tie traveled 60 kilometers south to Shenshui County, Shen Jia's hometown. The visit was not routine. It was prompted by a question that had begun to surface among investigators. What if the victim had been chosen? A retired local officer named Liu recognized Shen Jia immediately from the photograph. His reaction was not surprise but resignation. 10 years earlier, Shen Jia had been at the center of a scandal involving another young woman named Lu Lan. According to Liu, Lu Lan was quiet, academically gifted, and socially isolated. Shen Jia and several friends accused her of theft without evidence. The confrontation escalated. Lu Lan was dragged into a cornfield behind her home. There she was humiliated. Corn silk and cobs were forced into her mouth while she was beaten and mocked. The abuse ended only when she collapsed. That night, Lu Lan returned home, poured gasoline over herself, and set herself on fire. The blaze consumed the house. Her parents died inside. Only one family member survived. Her older brother, Lu Ping. After the incident, authorities ruled the deaths a suicide and an accident. Shen Jia and the others received disciplinary warnings. No criminal charges were filed. Within months, Shen Jia left the village. Lu Ping disappeared. Standing at the overgrown remains of the burned house, Li Tie understood what the case had been circling since the beginning. The corn was not a random object. It was a reference, a reenactment. The second body confirmed it. On October 12th, a sanitation worker discovered another female corpse at a landfill on the outskirts of the city. The position was similar. Naked. Strangled. This time, a stripped corn cob had been forced into the body. Bite marks were visible along the gnawed surface. The victim was identified as Zhang Li, a dancer at a nightclub. Her background mirrored Shen Jia's. Same hometown. Same social circle. Same involvement in the harassment of Lu Lan. This was not coincidence. This was selection. The killer was working through a list. As Li Tie reviewed the files, one conclusion became unavoidable. The murders were not escalating randomly. They were progressing methodically, guided by a memory that had not faded in 10 years. And somewhere in Baoding, someone was still waiting to be next. This was no longer a murder. It was a sequence. Part 3. The Planner and the Hand. By mid-October, the pattern was undeniable. The victims were not chosen at random. Their shared past was precise. Each had participated, directly or indirectly, in the humiliation of Lu Lan a decade earlier. Each had avoided legal consequence. Each had built a new life, while the memory of that night remained unburied. The investigation narrowed to those who remembered. Lu Ping, Lu Lan's older brother, became the central figure. He had motive beyond speculation. He had vanished after the fire. He had never sought compensation, reconciliation, or public acknowledgement. He had simply disappeared. For 10 years. But motive alone was not enough. Surveillance teams located a man named Chu Shi, living on the outskirts of Gaolin village, near an abandoned cemetery. His age and background aligned with Lu Ping's. He worked intermittently as an electrician and had recently taken seasonal employment at the Northern Experimental Farm. He lived alone. Neighbors described him as silent and withdrawn. When officers conducted a routine administrative check, the contradictions surfaced. Chu Shi's right hand was visibly impaired. The little finger was contracted inward, the muscles wasted. He explained it as nerve damage from an electrical accident years earlier. Medical records supported partial paralysis. The injury made sustained grip strength unlikely. This mattered. Manual strangulation requires continuous pressure. Breaking the hyoid bone requires force and control. Chu Shi did not appear capable of delivering it. Yet inside his home, investigators found a shrine. At its center was a framed photograph of Lu Lan. Corn was placed on the altar. Fresh. Carefully arranged. The ritual nature of the setup was unmistakable. Chu Shi did not deny his grief. He did not deny his anger. But he denied the killings. Surveillance continued. On the night of October 30th, Chu Shi left his house after midnight, carrying a black cloth bag. He walked toward an abandoned temple deep within a protected forest. Officers followed at a distance. Inside the ruined structure, he lit incense and spoke aloud, addressing no one visible. He apologized. He promised completion. He laid ears of corn on the altar as offerings. Then he moved again. He did not return home. Instead, he approached an underground bunker once used for wartime storage. He knocked 3 times. The door opened from within. Another man pulled him inside. This was the first confirmation that Chu Shi was not acting alone. Investigators shifted focus from motive to mechanics. A review of forensic evidence revealed consistency across both murders. The ligature marks were not caused by hands alone. Parallel striations suggested the use of a flat, flexible object. An electrician's cable fit the pattern. The bite marks on the stripped corn cob from the second victim were analyzed in detail. Dental specialists identified a distinctive defect. The upper left incisor was chipped at a 15-degree angle. The same defect was present in bite marks found on bruising on the first victim's thigh. One mouth, one biter. A suspect emerged. Su Meng, 42 years old, licensed electrician, previously employed at multiple construction sites near Baoding. He had worked briefly at the Northern Experimental Farm during the harvest period. Records showed he had night access to storage facilities. Medical files documented a congenital deformity of the right hand. The little finger was absent. 4 fingers. The final piece arrived during a failed capture. On October 25th, officers attempted an arrest near the cornfield where the first body had been found. A tall figure appeared near the site shortly after 2 in the morning, moving confidently through the rows. When police moved in, the suspect fled. He ran with speed and familiarity, navigating the terrain without hesitation. He escaped. At the location where he vanished, officers recovered a miner's flashlight and a work glove. The glove was worn, stained with corn sap, and designed for a 4-fingered hand. Inside, technicians found plant resin from the T12 strain and industrial oil commonly used on electrical equipment. The conclusion was no longer theoretical. Chu Shi was the architect. Chu Meng was the executioner. One preserved the memory. The other carried out the violence. The division of roles explained everything. The ritual behavior, the planning, the physical capacity required to kill, the escalation from whole corn to stripped cob, the increasing brutality. This was not chaos. It was choreography. As Li Tie reviewed the case board, the remaining names from Lu Lan's past stood out in red. 3 potential targets remained alive. Protective details were assigned. Time became the enemy, because revenge, once begun, rarely stops by itself. Revenge does not always pull the trigger. Sometimes it only gives the order. When justice arrives too late. The arrests did not come with relief. When Chu Shi and Xu Meng were finally taken into custody, the city of Baoding did not exhale. There were no crowds, no applause, only exhaustion. The case had reached its conclusion, but nothing about it felt resolved. Under interrogation, the roles became clear without theatrics. Chu Shi did not deny his intent. He spoke calmly, almost methodically, about Lu Lan. About the night she was humiliated. About the years that followed, when no one was punished and the village moved on as if nothing had happened. He described memory as a burden that did not fade. He described planning as necessity. Xu Meng confessed to the killings. He did not speak of hatred. He spoke of execution, of following instructions, of applying force where force was required. He detailed the use of electrical cable to control the neck, the pressure needed, the moment resistance ended. He described the placement of the corn without hesitation, as if recounting a technical procedure. Together, their statements aligned with the forensic record. No evidence suggested impulsive violence. No signs pointed to intoxication or loss of control. Every act was timed, every location selected. The victims were not stalked randomly. They were verified, confirmed, and marked. This was not a crime born overnight. It was cultivated. In court, the defense raised questions about culpability and psychological impairment. They referenced trauma. They referenced neglect. They referenced the failure of authorities a decade earlier. None of it altered the facts. 2 women were dead. They had been killed deliberately, with forethought and cruelty. Whatever crimes they may have committed in the past did not grant anyone the right to sentence them to death. The law does not function on memory. It functions on evidence. Chu Shi was convicted as the instigator. Su Meng was convicted as the perpetrator. The sentences reflected their roles, but the distinction mattered little to the families of the victims. Justice had arrived, but it had arrived late, burdened by context it could not erase. In the aftermath, the northern experimental farm quietly replaced its corn strains. The fields near Gaolin village were replanted. The burned house in Shenshui County remained abandoned, its foundation still blackened beneath layers of weeds. Nothing about the landscape testified to what had happened. But the case left a permanent record. It forced a reckoning not only with violence, but with neglect. With the cost of ignoring cruelty when it appears small. With the danger of unresolved harm allowed to decay in silence. This was not a story about monsters emerging from nowhere. It was a story about what forms when accountability fails and memory is left alone to harden. The investigation closed with paperwork and signatures. The evidence was archived. The corn, once central to the case, was reduced to photographs and lab reports. Yet the question it raised did not disappear. When justice fails once, it does not vanish. It waits. And sometimes it returns wearing another face. When justice fails once, it teaches someone else how to replace it.